This is Menelaus, a middle-aged, overweight, belligerent social climber, and this is his wife, Helen of Sparta. She's 14 and considered the most beautiful woman in the world. While Menelaus is away at his mom's funeral, Helen will be visited by this guy and his abs.
You can guess what happens next. Hi, I'm Cody Bonds, and this is a true history of the Trojan War.
Sometime around 1200 BC, the Aegean Greeks and the Dardanian Trojans got it into their heads that they needed to duke it out for control over trade in the Aegean Sea. But you can't just go around declaring war on people.
What they needed was an international incident that both parties could get behind.
Enter Paris of Troy, a Trojan diplomat visiting the distant land of Sparta. To give you an idea of exactly how slick our boy Prince Paris here is, the story goes that back in Troy, 3 goddesses showed up to have their beauty judged by his keen wisdom, an event that ended with everyone naked and offers to make him king of Europe, making this story especially popular with classical painters. So greasing the skids under a teenage beauty queen in a loveless marriage
wouldn't exactly have been a challenge for Paris.
When it came time for the Prince of Troy to return home, he brought Helen back with him. Whether she went willingly or was forced is up for debate. Menelaus came home to an empty house and the Cuckold of the Century award. The Greeks were usually down for a bit of wife napping in mythology, but when the sandal's on the other foot, it loses its humor. Fortunately for him, Helen of Sparta, now Helen of Troy, came with one hell of a prenuptial agreement. Her parents had been the previous king and queen of Sparta, and a marriage to Helen also meant ruling the province on their death. So all the blowhards of Greece had come to Sparta to cajole and threaten their way into her chambers to win the throne. Realizing this was a war waiting to happen, everyone turned to Odysseus, Prince of Ithaca, and self-proclaimed smartest guy in the room, to come up with a solution where everyone didn't kill each other. He made everyone present swear on a haunch of butchered horse meat that no matter who Helen and her parents chose, the suitors would defend the marriage.
Paris's elopement ticked that clause.
And Menelaus brought out that dead horse and started beating it. Never mind that he had only won because his brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae and the most powerful warlord in Greece, had gone to Sparta on Menelaus' behalf and all but threatened to invade if they didn't pick his baby bro. Years later, and still unwilling to fight his own battles, Menelaus went to Agamemnon to assemble a heist crew unlike any seen before or since in history, with the intent of getting his wife back. Too bad most of their recruits wanted nothing to do with it. The previously mentioned Odysseus had been smart enough to exchange his help in the whole Helen wedding fiasco for a chance to marry her almost as attractive and way smarter cousin. Now king of Ithaca and happily married with a newborn son,
he wasn't about to sail to the ass end of the Aegean because Menelaus had bad taste in women.
So he pulled a conscientious objector to dodge the draft, and when that didn't work, he went the 4F route and tried to plead insanity, harnessing a donkey to his plow and sowing his fields with salt so that nothing would grow on them.
Which actually worked.
Until Palamedes, a recruiter sent by Menelaus, tossed Odysseus' infant son in front of the plow. Odysseus swerved to avoid cutting the baby in half, and his ruse was discovered.
Odysseus never forgave Palamedes for that.
But like a Klingon, he serves his revenge cold. The invasion fleet gathered at the harbor of Aeolus. As Odysseus surveyed a beach covered in banners from across Greece, it became increasingly clear this wasn't about getting Menelaus' wife back. You don't need armies for a snatch and grab, and a mountain that talks isn't much help in marital arbitrations. Seeing the writing on the wall, Odysseus asked a prophet what their chances were of victory over Troy if they actually got to fighting, as rumors of its impregnable walls were told throughout the Mediterranean. They burned a few incense, made a collect call to Olympus, and discovered that the Aegeans would never take Troy without the godling Achilles on their side. The Prince of Phthia was rumored to be blessed with a swift-footed speed that would make Usain Bolt's eyes water. If anyone had reservations about recruiting a 14-year-old child soldier,
nobody wrote them down.
Odysseus was told to get hopping on that while everyone else arrived. Agamemnon also sent King Diomedes along with him, just in case Odysseus tried something again.
The youngest king there, Diomedes wasn't as clever as Odysseus, as shrewd as Agamemnon, as strong as Ajax, or as fast as Achilles, but second across the board made him the deadliest thing in Greece outside of smallpox.
The rub here was that Achilles' mother had received her own prophecy. If her baby boy ever went to war, he wouldn't come back again. So she had whisked Achilles away to the backwater island of Skyros, disguising him as a handmaiden in the local court.
Which was like putting a well-hung blonde fox in a henhouse.
As Achilles' demigod body and prowess with a spear quickly landed him in the princess's bedchamber, with a son born soon afterward.
But more on that later.
Odysseus followed the rumors of Achilles' whereabouts straight to Skyros, as a 6-foot-tall bronzed handmaiden with pythons for arms tends to get noticed. Instead of lifting up every skirt they came across, Odysseus disguised himself as a traveling merchant and told Diomedes to wait nearby.
The two had bonded on the trip over by swapping stories about how clever they both were, and now it was time to prove it.
Back in Skyros' market, Odysseus peddled clothing and jewelry to the handmaidens. Conspicuous among the goods was a newly cast bronze spear. When an especially strapping lady-in-waiting with shoulders you could land airplanes on was browsing his wares, Odysseus signaled Diomedes to trumpet an alarm on his war horn. Thinking the island was under attack, Achilles snatched up the spear to defend his newfound lady friends.
Odysseus would have laughed at Brad Pitt in a dress if that razor-sharp phallic instrument wasn't also millimeters away from his jugular.
Instead, he recruited the teenage murder prodigy on the spot. Achilles is brought to the Greek camp and is heralded as the new Aristos Achaeon,
champion of the Greeks. And even Ajax didn't argue the point.
With the band back together and 1,000 ships full of hairy dudes ready to launch on Helen's face,
that's not right.
With Helen's face set to launch 1,000 ships full of hairy dudes, it was time to set sail for Troy. But they quickly ran into the problem that none of them had actually been to Troy, and they weren't about to stop and ask any filthy peasants for directions. So after a few days of sailing east, they agreed to attack the first walled city they came across, sacking its port and rampaging through the streets. But it turns out basic defensive engineering was common everywhere outside of Greece, and this wasn't Troy. It was Mysia, a fact they discovered when King Telephus, a huge warrior wearing a lion mane, handed them their backsides and drove them out of the city single-handedly.
Because you don't accidentally attack the town that's ruled by the son of Hercules.
Achilles wasn't happy with losing his first real fight, even if it was to a fellow demigod, so he shanked Telephus in the thigh one good time before running away like everyone else back to the boats. A storm then kicked up that blew the invasion fleet sticks to the wind. Everyone agreed this was about as bad of a start as an invasion could get off to,
so they decided to bravely give up and go home again.
The Trojans had won without ever even throwing a blow, and Menelaus would need to find another wife. Odysseus was consulted for a new strategy, but he gave them one long hard look, shrugged his shoulders,
and promised to send them a postcard from Ithaca if he came up with anything clever.
They shook hands, and Odysseus was 1 foot back on his boat home when a huge lion-headed shadow descended over the Greek camp.
Turns out Telephus wasn't dead, and more importantly, he was pissed.
And he was asking for Achilles, specifically. Agamemnon et al. Shoved the boy out of his tent and quietly turned their backs to what was about to happen next.
Getting stabbed between the thighs by Achilles had left the son of Heracles with uncurable Homeric herpes. His wound had festered, and Telephus was there for a cure to whatever Achilles had hit him with.
Smelling an opportunity, the Greeks promised to help.
In exchange, Telephus would guide them to the walls of Troy. It turns out Agamemnon would get his war after all.
Make sure to subscribe to be notified for the next episode. When Agamemnon discovers the price of leadership, the Greeks have their own D-Day, and Achilles throws a tantrum fit for the ages. Also, there's a lot of corpse looting, like a concerning amount of corpse looting.